My name is Naomi, a 57-year-old retired social worker from Boston, and I never thought I'd hear those words from my daughter's mouth. Mackenzie and I were once inseparable, sharing secrets and dreams over late-night cocoa. But that day when she screamed at me to leave my own home, something inside me finally broke. With Timothy, my ex-husband, suddenly reappearing after years of absence, I faced the most difficult decision of my life. Before I share how a mother's love led me to the Realtor's office, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Take a second to like and subscribe and let me know in the comments. Have you ever had to choose between helping someone and enabling them? The story of Mackenzie and me goes back 29 years to a cold January morning when I first held her in my arms. From that moment, I dedicated my life to giving her everything I never had: stability, encouragement, and unconditional love. I worked as a social worker at Boston General Hospital, specializing in family crisis intervention. Ironic, considering what would unfold in my own family years later. Timothy and I divorced when Mackenzie was 10 after his gambling addiction drained our savings for the third time. The judge granted me full custody with Timothy owing substantial child support that he rarely paid. I turned down promotions that would have required longer hours or travel, choosing instead to be home when Mackenzie returned from school. We made do with less, but she never seemed to notice or mind. Those early years as a single parent were challenging, but rewarding. Mackenzie showed remarkable talent for music, particularly the violin. I worked extra weekend shifts to pay for lessons, watching with tears in my eyes as she performed solo at her first recital. Her music teacher, Miss Abrams, once told me she had never seen such natural talent in someone so young. Those evenings practicing together, me turning pages of sheet music while she played, remain some of my most treasured memories. Throughout middle and high school, our bond remained strong. We had Taco Tuesday traditions, weekend hiking trips to the Blue Hills, and summer vacations camping in Maine. Mackenzie confided in me about her first crush, her fears about college applications, and her dreams of playing violin professionally. I was not just her mother, but her confidant and best friend. Things began to shift subtly during her senior year of high school. Timothy suddenly reappeared, promising to make up for lost time now that his finances were in order. He took Mackenzie on lavish shopping trips and talked about paying for her college. I worried about her expectations being raised, knowing his pattern of grand promises followed by disappointment. When Mackenzie was accepted to Berklee College of Music with a partial scholarship, I was ecstatic. Timothy promised to cover the remaining tuition, a commitment that lasted exactly one semester before his checks started bouncing. Rather than let Mackenzie drop out, I took out a second mortgage on our modest home in Dorchester. She never knew. I told her a small inheritance from my aunt had come through. I wanted her to focus on her studies without financial worry. College brought the first real distance between us. Our daily calls became weekly, then sporadic. When she did call, her voice sounded different, guarded, hurried. During her sophomore year, she met Jackson during a student collaboration project. He was studying music production, charismatic and ambitious, with connections in the industry that impressed her. The first time I met Jackson, something felt off. He answered questions directed at Mackenzie, kept his arm possessively around her waist, and made subtle comments undermining her talent. "Mackenzie's good, but she needs my help breaking into the industry. Classical training only gets you so far," he said while she nodded along. The confident, opinionated daughter I raised seemed to have vanished in his presence. Holiday visits became increasingly tense. Mackenzie would arrive later than promised and leave earlier than planned. Jackson always had some industry event they couldn't miss, some connection too important to pass up. I noticed she called her old friends less frequently, dropped her chamber music group, and changed her performance style to match Jackson's preferences. Meanwhile, Timothy had remarried and had 2 sons with his new wife. His sporadic involvement in Mackenzie's life became even less reliable. He would make grand gestures, offering to fly her to New York for auditions, or promising industry introductions that never materialized, then disappear for months. Each disappointment seemed to push her further into Jackson's orbit, as though seeking the male approval her father had withheld. I tried building my own life during those years. My friend Judith set me up on blind dates, most ending after awkward coffee meetings where conversation revolved around their divorce grievances or health problems. One relationship with a kind history professor named Alan lasted 8 months, but ended when he accepted a position in California. After that, I focused on my career, my community garden plot, and my book club. I started planning for retirement, thinking about downsizing from our 3-bedroom home to something more manageable. Looking back, I see now that each small disconnection between Mackenzie and me created the foundation for what would eventually become a chasm. Every unanswered call, every shortened visit, every conversation where she seemed distracted. These were warning signs I chose to interpret as normal independence, rather than the influence of someone slowly isolating her from her support system. If I had known then what I understand now about controlling relationships, perhaps I would have intervened differently. But at the time, I was simply a mother trying to respect her adult daughter's choices while keeping the door always open for her return. I never imagined that door would eventually be slammed in my face with a threat to call the police. The day Mackenzie graduated from Berkeley, I sat in the audience, bursting with pride, even as I noticed she scanned the crowd looking for Jackson, rather than me, after receiving her diploma. The reception afterward was brief. They had to leave for an industry party that Jackson insisted would be career-making. 2 weeks later, Mackenzie called, asking if she could move home just for a few months until she found steady work. "Of course," I said without hesitation. "Your room is always waiting for you." When she arrived with Jackson helping carry her belongings, I was shocked by the sheer volume of stuff. Enough to fill a one-bedroom apartment. Boxes of clothes, recording equipment, furniture pieces. My first clue this wouldn't be temporary. "We can put the extra boxes in the basement," I offered, trying to hide my concern. "Actually, can we convert your home office back to my bedroom? Jackson will be staying over sometimes, and the guest room is too small for all my things," Mackenzie said, already moving toward my workspace. I had been using that room to manage household finances and do occasional freelance consulting work since retiring. Nevertheless, I spent that evening moving my desk and files into the corner of my bedroom to accommodate her. By the time I finished, Mackenzie and Jackson had gone out with friends, leaving boxes blocking the hallway. The first few weeks, I bent over backward to make them comfortable. I adjusted my schedule, waking up earlier to shower before Mackenzie needed the bathroom. I cooked her favorite meals, did extra laundry, and tried to give them space when Jackson visited, which quickly became 5 or 6 nights a week. I even started wearing headphones while watching television, so they could use the living room for networking with other musicians, which often involved loud gatherings lasting well past midnight. 2 months in, I noticed troubling patterns. Mackenzie wasn't actively job hunting, but claimed to be building her brand online. Jackson had lost his production assistant position and now spent days in my home using my utilities, eating my food, and collaborating with Mackenzie on projects that never seemed to progress. Meanwhile, my credit card statement showed charges I hadn't made: music equipment, rideshare services, food delivery, and clothing stores. When I gently asked about the charges, Mackenzie seemed genuinely apologetic. "I'm so sorry, Mom. We had these audition opportunities and I needed proper clothes and equipment. It was an emergency, but I'll pay you back as soon as we book our first real gig." Her eyes filled with tears. "You want me to succeed, right?" That manipulation worked the first time and the second. By the third time, I was becoming concerned about my retirement savings. I had planned carefully for years, but supporting 2 additional adults was rapidly depleting my cushion. When I mentioned this to my financial advisor, Barbara, she warned me bluntly, "Naomi, you're on a fixed income now. This arrangement isn't sustainable. You need to establish boundaries before you end up unable to support yourself." The first major conflict erupted 6 months into their stay. I returned from my sister Patty's house to find 20 people in my living room, empty liquor bottles from my cabinet, cigarette burns on my couch, and someone had been sick in my bathroom without cleaning it up. Mackenzie was nowhere to be found, but Jackson sat on my kitchen counter playing my late father's guitar. "Where is Mackenzie?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "She went to get more ice." "Great party, right?" "These are all industry people, Naomi. Good connections." He strummed the guitar carelessly, not even looking up. "That guitar isn't to be played. It was my father's." I took it from his hands, noticing a crack in the neck that hadn't been there before. "Chill out. Mackenzie said it was fine to use it. This is her home too, you know." That night, after the last guest left at 3 in the morning, I sat Mackenzie down. "We need to discuss house rules. I understand you're an adult, but this is still my home." "God, Mom, it was one party, we're networking. That's how the music industry works." She rolled her eyes like she was 15 again. "It's not just the party. It's the credit card charges, the utilities, the food. I'm retired now and my income is limited. So, what you're saying is you don't want to support my career after all your talk about wanting me to follow my dreams. Her voice rose, Jackson appearing silently behind her. I'm saying I need you to contribute to expenses if you're both going to live here, and I need respect for my home and belongings. We eventually agreed to a written arrangement. They would pay $400 monthly toward expenses, respect quiet hours after 10 on weeknights, and ask permission before having guests over. I also set a 3-month deadline for them to find their own place offering to help with the security deposit. The agreement lasted exactly 2 weeks before being ignored completely. The money never materialized. Parties continued. My belongings disappeared or were damaged. When the 3-month deadline passed, Mackenzie acted as though the conversation had never happened. My friends grew increasingly concerned. Judith, who had known Mackenzie since birth, confronted me after a lunch where I looked exhausted and jumped at every text message. Naomi, you're being taken advantage of. This isn't helping Mackenzie become independent. It's enabling her to avoid responsibility while this boyfriend controls both of you. My therapist, Dr. Wilson, whom I started seeing for anxiety, was equally direct. You're describing classic boundary violations and financial abuse. Your role as a mother doesn't include sacrificing your well-being and security. Even my sister Patty, who had 3 adult children of her own, expressed concern. My kids went through rough patches too, but there's a difference between supporting and enabling. You're doing the latter and it's hurting both of you. The toll on my health became impossible to ignore. I developed insomnia, my blood pressure rose, and the stress-induced migraines I hadn't experienced since my divorce returned with a vengeance. Some mornings I would sit in my car in the grocery store parking lot, unwilling to return to the tension waiting at home. I began to feel like a stranger in my own house, tiptoeing around, afraid to upset the delicate balance. As my physical health deteriorated, my financial situation grew increasingly precarious. Barbara warned that at the current rate, I would deplete my retirement savings 15 years earlier than projected. The dream of aging securely in my own home was slipping away, replaced by visions of dependence on a daughter who already resented my smallest requests. I began to realize I was trapped in a situation of my own, making one that was harming not only me, but also the daughter I had tried so hard to support. By failing to enforce boundaries, I had created an environment where Mackenzie couldn't develop the resilience and responsibility she would need for a sustainable adult life. My greatest fear was becoming reality and trying to protect her from hardship. I was crippling her ability to face life's inevitable challenges. After 8 months of this arrangement, I tried multiple approaches to resolve the situation. First, I organized a family meeting, complete with printed agenda and homemade cookies. Mackenzie's favorite oatmeal chocolate chip. I prepared what I thought was a reasonable proposal. They would increase their contribution to $600 monthly to cover their actual expenses, respect house rules about guests and noise, and commit to moving out within 6 months with my help on the deposit. Jackson arrived late, scrolling through his phone throughout my presentation. Mackenzie alternated between defensive responses and tearful accusations. You're trying to sabotage our career just when we're making connections, she insisted. No one else's parents charge them rent during tough times. Melissa's parents bought her a condo. Melissa's parents are investment bankers, I pointed out. I'm a retired social worker with limited savings. If you really wanted to help, you'd let us focus on our music without adding financial pressure. Jackson interjected without looking up from his phone. The meeting ended with Mackenzie storming out and Jackson following, both headed to a club opening where they supposedly had VIP access. No agreement was reached, no concessions made. My next attempt involved creating a written contract which I placed on Mackenzie's bed along with information about affordable apartment listings and first-time renter assistance programs. I found it the next day, crumpled in the trash, replaced by more shopping bags containing expensive new music equipment. The final deadline I set passed without acknowledgement. When I mentioned it over breakfast, Mackenzie looked genuinely confused. What deadline? We never agreed to that. Besides, we have a showcase coming up that could change everything. You wouldn't want us distracted by moving right now, would you? Around this time, Timothy unexpectedly re-entered the picture. He called one evening, his voice uncharacteristically concerned. Naomi, I ran into Harrison Walsh at a conference. He mentioned seeing Mackenzie and some guy at a club looking, well, not great. Is everything okay with our daughter? The "our daughter" nearly made me laugh. Where had R been during college tuition season or high school graduations? Mackenzie is going through a challenging career phase, I said diplomatically. She and her boyfriend are staying with me temporarily while they build their music business. Timothy's response surprised me. That doesn't sound like the ambitious girl I know. Let me talk to her. Maybe I can help financially if she has a solid plan. His offer came with conditions, of course. He would help with an apartment deposit if Mackenzie enrolled in a music business program and created a structured career plan. Part of me appreciated his practical approach, while another part resented his sudden parental concern after years of minimal involvement. When Timothy called Mackenzie, it created a new dynamic. Suddenly, she was playing us against each other, telling Timothy I was unsupportive of her creative process, while telling me Timothy didn't understand the modern music industry. Jackson expertly manipulated these tensions, whispering advice to Mackenzie before family calls and smirking in the background during our increasingly heated discussions. I began noticing more concerning signs of Jackson's control. Mackenzie's phone was never out of his sight, and he would answer her text messages while she was in the shower. He vetoed job opportunities as beneath her talent, or schedule conflicts with potential gigs that never materialized. When her former violin teacher offered private students, Jackson convinced her it would damage her artistic credibility to teach beginners. Old friends from Berkeley would call, and Jackson would say she was too busy to talk. Her childhood friend Sophie stopped by unannounced once, and the awkward interaction that followed, with Jackson hovering and answering questions then directed at Mackenzie, ended with Sophie giving me a worried look as she left. Desperate for guidance, I joined a support group for parents of adult children. The stories shared there were both comforting and alarming. I wasn't alone in my struggles, but the experiences of parents further along this path warned of potential decades of enabling if I didn't act decisively. There were brief periods that gave me false hope. After a particularly emotional conversation where I showed Mackenzie my depleted savings account, she applied for several administrative jobs at music venues and schools. For 2 weeks, she helped with household chores, expressed gratitude for my support, and limited parties to weekends only. Jackson temporarily reduced his presence, and we shared a few dinners that reminded me of the close relationship we once had. Then came the crushing disappointment. Mackenzie had secured an interview at the Boston Symphony Orchestra for an administrative position that could have led to audition opportunities. The morning of the interview, I woke early to make her favorite breakfast, only to find a note saying she and Jackson had left for New York for a can't-miss showcase. She had abandoned the interview for yet another of Jackson's promised opportunities. That evening, my credit card company called about suspicious charges, over $2,000 at guitar shops and recording studios in Manhattan. When I tried calling Mackenzie, her phone went straight to voicemail. They returned 3 days later with no apology, no explanation, and no showcase success to report. I realized then that all my attempts at conventional resolution had failed. The patterns were deeply entrenched, and my well-meaning support had become destructive enablement. Something needed to change, but I still couldn't imagine the catalyst that would finally force that change would be my own daughter threatening to call the police on me in my own home. The day everything changed started like many others in our increasingly dysfunctional household. I had woken early to avoid the bathroom conflict, made coffee in silence, and left for my weekly therapy appointment with Dr. Wilson. I feel like I'm living in a hostage situation, I admitted after describing another week of walking on eggshells. Naomi, we've discussed this for months now. What's keeping you from taking definitive action? What's your greatest fear? Dr. Wilson asked. I stared out her office window at the maple tree beginning to turn crimson with early fall. That I'll lose her completely. That she'll cut me off and I'll never see her again. Are you seeing much of the real Mackenzie now? The daughter you raised? Her question struck me profoundly. The truth was, I'd already lost the Mackenzie I knew. The woman living in my home was a shell of my daughter, parroting Jackson's opinions and prioritizing his desires over her own well-being. I returned home with a new resolve to check my financial accounts, which I'd been avoiding out of fear. What I discovered sent shockwaves through me. Multiple unauthorized transfers from my retirement account to my checking account, followed by ATM withdrawals at locations I'd never visited. Thousands of dollars gone. With trembling hands, I went upstairs to Mackenzie's room while they were out. I wasn't proud of searching my adult daughter's space, but the financial violations demanded investigation. Under her bed, I found receipts for recording equipment far more expensive than necessary for beginner's designer clothes with tags still attached, and most disturbingly small plastic bags containing white powder and pills I didn't recognize. While still processing these discoveries, I overheard them entering the house. Instead of confronting them immediately, I sat quietly on the stairs listening as they discussed me in the kitchen. "She's getting suspicious about the money," Mackenzie said, her voice tense. "Relax. She's clueless," Jackson replied. "Besides, we deserve that money more than she does. She's just sitting on it while we're trying to build something. Tell her you need $3,000 for that production software we discussed. Use the tears if necessary. Works every time." "I don't know, Jackson. She looked really worried last week when she was checking her bank statement." "Your mother has plenty. And if she doesn't, she can sell this place. Real estate in this neighborhood is worth a fortune now. Stop being so weak. You want our studio or not?" Their casual discussion of manipulating me, their entitlement to my life savings, struck me physically like a blow to the chest. 27 years of putting Mackenzie first, of sacrificing opportunities, relationships, and financial security for her well-being, reduced to an ATM function, a resource to be drained. Something crystallized in that moment. I walked downstairs and into the kitchen, my face calm despite the storm inside. "Mackenzie, Jackson, we need to talk, now." Jackson's expression shifted instantly from annoyance to charm. "Naomi, we were just discussing how to thank you for everything you've done. Weren't we, Mac?" Mackenzie nodded unconvincingly, avoiding my eyes. "I've made some decisions." I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "I've canceled all my credit cards and changed my bank passwords. I've also set a final deadline. You have 30 days to find other living arrangements." Their shock was evident. This wasn't the usual empty threat or negotiable boundary. "Are you serious right now?" Mackenzie's voice rose. "You're kicking out your own daughter." "I'm asking my adult daughter and her boyfriend to take responsibility for themselves. I'll help with a security deposit for an apartment, paid directly to the landlord, not to you. I'll help you move. But this arrangement ends in 30 days. Jackson stepped forward, his facade cracking. "You can't do this. We have rights as tenants now." "Actually, I've consulted an attorney. You have no lease pay, no formal rent, and I can legally require you to leave with proper notice. This conversation is that notice." Mackenzie's face contorted with anger I barely recognized. "You've never supported my dreams? You're jealous that I have real talent and opportunities you never had." Each accusation felt like a knife, but I stood firm. "Mackenzie, I love you too much to continue enabling behavior that's hurting both of us. The drugs under your bed, the stealing from my accounts, this isn't the daughter I raised." Her face went pale at the mention of the drugs. Then something in her snapped. She stood up, pointing at the door. Get out! Get out of this room right now." "This is my house, Mackenzie." "Go away, or I'll call the police!" She screamed, her voice breaking with rage and fear. Jackson smirked behind her, clearly enjoying the drama and believing they had won again. That smirk, more than anything, solidified my resolve. I looked at my daughter. Really looked at her. The dark circles under her eyes, the nervous twitch in her hands, the way she angled her body toward Jackson, awaiting his approval. I saw not an entitled brat, but a young woman who had lost herself in an unhealthy relationship and needed intervention, not accommodation. "Call them if you want," I said quietly. "I'll be in my car." I walked out to my 10-year-old Honda and sat there, tears finally flowing freely. I called Judith, who answered on the first ring. They threatened to call the police on me, in my own home. I managed between sobs. "Come over right now," she insisted. "You're staying with me tonight." I spent that night in Judith's guest room staring at old photos of Mackenzie on my phone. The smiling child holding her first violin. The teenager accepting a music award. The college student with bright eyes, full of promise. Somewhere along the way, that vibrant young woman had disappeared, replaced by someone I barely recognized. In the quiet darkness, I remembered something my own mother told me before she passed. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let people face the consequences of their choices. At the time, I thought it sounded harsh. Now I understood it was the deepest wisdom. The next morning, I woke with absolute clarity about what needed to be done. Instead of returning home, I made 3 phone calls. First to my attorney, Margaret, to discuss tenant eviction laws and timeline. Next to Barbara, my financial advisor, to secure my remaining assets and discuss budget options. Finally, to Dr. Wilson, who fit me in for an emergency session. "I'm proud of you," Dr. Wilson said after hearing about my confrontation. "This is the healthy boundary we've been working toward. Are you prepared for the backlash?" "No," I admitted, "but I'm less prepared to watch my daughter destroy herself while I finance it." After my appointment, I drove to Coldwell Banker Real Estate and asked to speak with an agent. Carol Jenkins, a warm woman about my age, listened attentively as I explained my situation in broad strokes. "I need to sell my home relatively quickly. 3 bedrooms in Dorchester, good condition except for some recent wear and tear. I'm looking to downsize to a small condo, preferably near the water." Carol nodded with understanding that went beyond professional interest. "I helped my sister through something similar with her son last year. How soon would you like to list?" "Immediately," I said, surprising myself with my conviction. "I can be ready for photographs by the end of the week." We discussed market value timeline and strategies for showing a home with potentially uncooperative occupants. The numbers looked better than expected. Years of housing market growth meant my modest home had nearly tripled in value since purchase. Even after buying a smaller place mortgage-free, I would have enough to replenish much of my depleted retirement savings. As I signed the listing agreement, a weight lifted. For the first time in nearly a year, I felt in control of my life again. I wasn't just reacting to Mackenzie and Jackson's latest crisis or manipulation. I was taking proactive steps toward my own well-being. Before returning home, I made preparations for potential worst-case scenarios. I rented a small storage unit and moved irreplaceable items there. My mother's jewelry, important documents, family photographs, and sentimental valuables. I took photos of every room to document the current condition. I arranged for a locksmith to change the locks after the closing, whenever that would be. The final piece came from an unexpected source. Timothy called, having heard from Mackenzie a dramatically distorted version of our confrontation. "She claims you went crazy and threatened to make her homeless because you're jealous of her relationship with Jackson," he said, skepticism evident in his tone. I explained the reality: the financial abuse, the drugs, the gradual takeover of my home, and my plan to sell. There was a long pause before Timothy responded. "I've been trying to make up for lost time by always being the good guy with Mackenzie. But that's not what she needs right now, is it?" "No," I said simply. "She needs parents united in helping her find her way back to herself." Timothy surprised me with his next words. "I have a furnished guest house at our place in Connecticut. I'll offer it to Mackenzie. Only Mackenzie, not Jackson. With conditions. 3 months maximum job hunting from day one and mandatory family counseling." "She'll never accept," I said, though I was moved by his offer. "She might when she realizes the alternative is truly being on her own." "I've enabled her too, Naomi, just in different ways." It's time we both stopped. We agreed to present a united front when telling Mackenzie about the house sale. I returned home that afternoon to find the place empty except for newly damaged walls where it appeared Jackson had punched through the drywall in anger. I spent the evening cleaning, organizing, and mentally preparing for the conversation ahead. When they finally returned around midnight, I was sitting calmly at the kitchen table. "We need to talk," I said. "I've made some decisions that will affect you both. If this is more deadline threats, save it." Jackson started, but Mackenzie nudged him, perhaps sensing something different in my demeanor. "I've listed the house for sale. The realtor will be here tomorrow to take photographs. I'll be moving to a 1-bedroom condo, which obviously won't have space for either of you." Their faces registered shock, then disbelief, then anger in rapid succession. "You can't just sell our home," Mackenzie exploded. "It's not our home, it's my home," I corrected gently. "I've owned it since before you were born." "Where are we supposed to go?" The panic in her voice almost broke my resolve. "Your father has offered you, just you, Mackenzie, his guest house in Connecticut for 3 months while you get on your feet. There are conditions involving work and counseling." Jackson's face darkened. "She's not going anywhere without me. Tell him, Mackenzie." I watched my daughter's internal struggle play across her face. the first time I'd seen her consider options that didn't align with Jackson's demands. This is happening, I continued. The market is strong and the realtor expects offers within weeks. You can choose your father's offer, find an apartment together, or make other arrangements, but this house will be sold. You'll regret this, Jackson threatened, pulling Mackenzie toward the stairs. Come on, we don't need to listen to this. After they left, I texted Timothy. Told them, went as expected, keep the guest house offer open. For the first time in months, I slept soundly, the certainty of my decision bringing unexpected peace despite the conflict ahead. The first week after my announcement was tense beyond description. Mackenzie and Jackson alternated between icy silence and explosive arguments. They made no effort to find alternative housing, clearly believing my resolve would crumble as it had so many times before. Carol arrived with her photographer the next day, professionally ignoring the hostile atmosphere as she assessed the home and discussed staging. We'll minimize the personal items and neutralize the space, she explained while Jackson glared from the doorway. Despite the minor damage, the bones of the house are excellent, and the neighborhood has become extremely desirable. When the listing went live, complete with professional photographs that somehow made my modest home look spacious and elegant, Mackenzie confronted me with her phone screen displaying the listing. $350,000. You're making that much money by throwing us out. I maintained my calm, a skill developed through years of social work with families in crisis. The money will secure my retirement after the significant withdrawals from my accounts over the past year. This isn't about punishing you, it's about securing my future. The showing schedule posted on the refrigerator prompted their first attempt at sabotage. They deliberately left dishes in the sink, clothing strewn across furniture, and once turned off the heat before a showing in November. Carol handled each situation professionally, but I could see her concern growing. We might want to consider showing while they're out, she suggested tactfully. Some buyers are having trouble seeing past the current conditions. Despite these challenges, 3 serious offers came in by the end of the week. Boston's housing shortage meant even homes needing work attracted motivated buyers. The second offer was particularly promising, a young family willing to close quickly and allow me a month to arrange my move. As the reality of the impending sale set in, tensions escalated further. I returned from grocery shopping to find my bedroom had been searched, drawers left open, and contents disturbed. My mother's antique silver brush set was missing, along with the emergency cash I kept for urgent home repairs. The next day, while cleaning, I found a pawn shop receipt in the trash. Fighting nausea, I drove to the address listed and found my mother's silver there, along with several other family items I hadn't even noticed were missing. The cost to redeem them was substantial, but I couldn't bear to lose these connections to my past. That evening, I took the painful step of installing a lock on my bedroom door, feeling like a stranger in my own home. Jackson responded by threatening legal action, claiming tenant rights, and intimidating me with legal jargon he clearly didn't understand. I've already discussed this with my attorney, I replied, handing him printed information on Massachusetts housing law. You are technically lodgers, not tenants, given the circumstances of your stay. But if you'd like to pursue legal action, we can certainly go that route. It would involve filing formal statements about your residency income and activities here. The implied threat about documenting their drug use and financial exploitation hung in the air. Jackson backed down, stomping upstairs to consult with Mackenzie. The community aspects of the situation proved unexpected. Neighbors who had endured months of late-night noise and parking issues expressed support for my decision. My sister Patty offered to store additional belongings at her home. Judith committed to being present during difficult conversations for moral support. Even my book club rallied around me, one member offering her vacation home if I needed temporary housing between selling and buying. Timothy remained steadfast in his offer to Mackenzie, calling her directly several times to discuss details. Their conversations inevitably ended in her tears and anger, but he continued reaching out, showing a persistence I'd never seen during our marriage. I had almost resigned myself to Jackson and Mackenzie staying until forced out by the new owners when an unexpected development accelerated events. The buyer's offer included a quick closing, just 21 days, with an excellent price contingent on a clean inspection. Suddenly, the abstract timeline became concrete. The night after I signed the acceptance paperwork, I found Mackenzie alone in the kitchen, a rare moment without Jackson's hovering presence. She looked younger, somehow vulnerable in a way I hadn't seen since she was a teenager. So it's really happening, she said, staring into her tea. You're really selling our home. Yes, I confirmed gently. The closing is in 3 weeks. She looked up, her eyes brimming with tears and something else. A flash of the authentic Mackenzie I remembered. I don't know what to do, Mom. Everything's such a mess. I fought the urge to immediately offer solutions to sweep in and fix everything as I always had. Instead, I asked, what do you want, Mackenzie? Not what Jackson wants, not what you think you should want. What do you want? Her hands trembled around her mug. I don't even know anymore. The music industry isn't what I thought. I haven't really played my violin not for show or recording, in months. Where's Jackson tonight? I asked, noticing the time. At a club meeting, some producer. He said I'd just be in the way. Her voice held a note of resentment I hadn't heard before. Does that happen often? She nodded slowly. More and more lately. He says I don't present the right image for certain venues. Too classical, not edgy enough. We sat in silence for a moment, the first comfortable quiet we'd shared in over a year. Dad called again about the guest house, she finally said. And Jackson says it's a trap, that you and Dad are trying to separate us because you're jealous of our connection and potential. She sounded uncertain, as though testing the words rather than believing them. What do you think? She looked startled by the question, as though unaccustomed to her opinion being sought. I think I need time to figure things out. But Jackson says we're a package deal. His contact's my talent. Mackenzie, when was the last time those contacts led to actual paid work? Her silence was answer enough. Your father's offer is just to you, yes. Because he and I both see how isolated you've become, how all your decisions now filter through Jackson first. That's not a healthy partnership, it's control. She started to object, then stopped, staring at her hands. He wouldn't like me talking to you like this. The simple statement contained volumes about the nature of their relationship. The guest house offer stands, I said, standing to leave before pushing too hard. Whatever you decide, I love you. That hasn't changed. As I headed upstairs, I heard her whisper, I've missed you, Mom. Those 4 words kindled a tiny flame of hope that perhaps through this painful process, I might not only save myself, but also help my daughter find her way back to herself. The day the moving truck arrived was surreal. Just 10 days after accepting the offer, I was preparing to leave the home where I'd raised my daughter, hosted holiday dinners, and built a life. The inspection had gone well enough, with only minor repairs needed before closing. The buyers, a young couple expecting their first child, seemed perfect for a house filled with family memories. I had found and purchased a small 1-bedroom condo in a waterfront building in Quincy, peaceful, secure, and requiring minimal maintenance. At 57, I was starting over in ways I never anticipated, both terrifying and exhilarating. The most unexpected turn came 3 days before moving day. I returned from signing the final condo paperwork to find Mackenzie sitting on the porch steps, alone, a suitcase beside her. Mackenzie, what's happening? I asked, my heart racing. I called Dad, she said, her voice steadier than I'd heard in months. I'm going to take him up on the guest house offer. I sat beside her, careful to contain my immediate surge of hope. What about Jackson? We had a fight, a bad one. She pushed her sleeve up to reveal finger-shaped bruises on her arm. It wasn't the first time. Just the worst. My social worker training kicked in, keeping my expression neutral despite the rage building inside. Are you safe now? Where is he? He stormed out when I told him I was leaving, took some of my equipment and said I'd never work in this industry without him. She smiled bitterly, as if I've been working in it with him. I gently placed my arm around her shoulders, half expecting her to pull away. Instead, she leaned into me slightly. Dad's coming to pick me up in an hour. I only packed my personal things, not the studio equipment or anything Jackson and I bought together. I just want out. I think that's wise, I said carefully. Have you considered filing a police report about the physical abuse? She tensed. Not yet. Maybe after I'm away and feel safer. Right now, I just need to go. We sat in silence, watching the autumn leaves scatter across the yard. Finally, she spoke again, her voice small. I'm sorry, Mom, for everything. The money, the threats, the horrible things I said. We have a lot to work through, I acknowledged. But right now, I'm just glad you're taking this step for yourself. Timothy arrived exactly on time, a small surprise given his history of unreliability. He looked older than I remembered, gray threading through his once dark hair, but his eyes were clear and determined as he loaded Mackenzie's suitcases into his SUV. You'll call me when you're settled, I asked Mackenzie as we embraced goodbye. Tomorrow, she promised. And Mom, thank you for not giving up on me even when I gave you every reason to. As they drove away, I noticed Jackson watching from across the street, his face contorted with anger. He approached once they were out of sight, alternating between threats and pleading. She'll be back. She's nothing without me, he insisted, even as he begged to know where she had gone. It's time for you to leave too, Jackson, I said firmly. The locks change tomorrow and anything left behind will be considered abandoned. You'll regret this, he threatened, echoing his words from weeks before. Both of you will. No, I don't think we will, I replied with a calmness that seemed to infuriate him further. He left that night taking what he could carry and leaving destruction in his wake. Holes punched in walls, broken dishes, clothing strewn everywhere. The damage was superficial compared to the emotional wreckage he had caused, and nothing the closing costs couldn't cover. Moving day itself was bittersweet. Judith and Patty helped pack the smaller items while the movers handled furniture. We found forgotten treasures in closets and cabinets. Mackenzie's first violin bow report cards from elementary school photos from happier times. Each item carefully wrapped and labeled, bridging past and future. As the last box left the house, I walked through empty rooms echoing with 27 years of memories. This house had witnessed my daughter's first steps, her violin recitals, teenage sleepovers, graduation celebrations. It had sheltered us through Timothy's abandonment, financial struggles, and now this final crisis that had ultimately led to a necessary new beginning. In the empty living room, I remembered rocking infant Mackenzie to sleep during colicky nights. In the kitchen, I saw shadows of countless family meals and heart-to-heart conversations. Even the recent pain, the arguments, threats, and disappointments seemed to fade against the backdrop of those earlier, sweeter moments. I closed the door one final time with tears, but no regret. The young family would create their own memories here while I carried forward only what served my new life and left behind what didn't. My new condo, though smaller, immediately felt like mine in a way my house hadn't for months. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the bay, filling the space with natural light. The building had security, a small gym, and a community garden plot on the roof. Most importantly, it represented financial security restored and boundaries firmly established. The first night in my new home, I sat on my balcony watching boats in the harbor and felt something I hadn't experienced in too long: peace. Not happiness yet, but the quiet assurance that I had made necessary choices to protect both myself and ultimately my daughter. Mackenzie called the next day as promised. The conversation was awkward at times, raw with recent wounds, but underneath ran a current of authenticity that had been missing for years. Dad has me scheduled with a therapist tomorrow, she said, and he's found a violin teacher looking for an assistant. It's not glamorous, but it's a start. That sounds promising, I replied, careful not to overwhelm her with enthusiasm. I played yesterday, just for myself, Bach partitas in the guest house. I'd forgotten how it felt to play for the joy of it, not for Instagram or Jackson's producer friends. Her voice brightened with a passion I hadn't heard in years. We ended the call with plans to talk again in a few days, a small step toward rebuilding trust and communication. I had no illusions that our relationship would heal overnight or that Mackenzie's journey would be straightforward. Controlling relationships leave deep scars that take time to fade. But for the first time in years, we were both on paths toward authentic living rather than mutual destruction. As I unpacked boxes in my new kitchen, I found a small package I didn't recognize. Inside was my mother's silver hairbrush, the one I'd redeemed from the pawn shop, with a note in Mackenzie's handwriting: "I'm sorry, starting over, love you." 3 simple phrases that held worlds of meaning and the first fragile promise of healing to come. 1 year passed more quickly than I could have imagined. My condo became truly home, decorated simply but warmly with carefully chosen items that brought joy rather than the accumulated clutter of decades. The rooftop garden yielded summer tomatoes and herbs. I made friends with neighbors, other empty nesters, young professionals, a retired teacher who became my regular walking companion along the harbor path. My financial situation stabilized completely. After replenishing my retirement accounts, I even had enough to take a small trip to Maine, retracing the camping routes Mackenzie and I had enjoyed during happier times. Barbara, my financial advisor, helped establish a monthly budget that allowed small luxuries while ensuring long-term security. The emotional healing took longer but progressed steadily. Weekly sessions with Dr. Wilson continued focusing less on crisis management and more on rebuilding my identity beyond motherhood. I joined a community orchestra playing flute for the first time since college. I volunteered teaching literacy at the senior center, finding purpose in helping others while maintaining healthy boundaries. Mackenzie's journey followed a rockier path as expected. She stayed in Timothy's guest house the full 3 months, working part-time at the violin studio while attending therapy twice weekly. Jackson made repeated attempts to contact her, alternating between threats, guilt trips, and declarations of undying love. With support from her therapist, Mackenzie obtained a restraining order after he showed up uninvited at Timothy's property. Our relationship rebuilt slowly through weekly phone calls that gradually lengthened and deepened. We established new patterns of communication, learning to respect boundaries while maintaining connection. The first time she visited my condo 4 months after moving out, the awkwardness was palpable. By the third visit, we could laugh together again, rediscovering the easy companionship we'd once shared. Timothy surprised everyone by maintaining his supportive stance long after the initial crisis. He attended family therapy sessions consistently, finally acknowledging the impact of his absence during Mackenzie's formative years. While he and I would never be friends, we developed a respectful co-parenting relationship that should have existed decades earlier. The most profound moment of the year came unexpectedly during a dinner I hosted to mark the anniversary of moving day. Mackenzie had brought her violin, having recently joined a small chamber music group. Timothy and his wife Laura attended along with Judith, Patty, and a few close friends who had supported us through the darkest times. After dinner, Mackenzie stood nervously, violin in hand. "I'd like to play something I've been working on," she announced. "It's a piece I composed called Starting Over." The music began hesitantly with discordant notes reflecting chaos and pain. Gradually, the melody found its path, incorporating classical themes from her training while adding contemporary elements that were uniquely her voice. By the final movement, the composition had transformed into something both melancholic and hopeful, complex, yet accessible. When she finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. In those minutes of music, Mackenzie had expressed what words couldn't fully capture: the journey through darkness, the painful growth, the beauty that can emerge from brokenness. Later, as guests departed, Mackenzie helped me wash dishes, a comfortable silence between us. "I saw Jackson last week," she said suddenly, "at a coffee shop downtown. He pretended not to see me." I paused, waiting for her to continue. I realized something strange. I felt nothing. No anger, no fear, no longing. Just nothing. Like looking at a stranger who once knew me but doesn't anymore. That's significant progress, I observed, remembering my own similar moment after divorce from Timothy. "I'm playing at a real venue next month." She continued, changing subjects. "Nothing fancy, just a community arts space, but they're paying me. Would you come?" I wouldn't miss it, I promised, touched by the invitation. As we finished cleaning, Mackenzie leaned against the counter, studying me with new awareness. "You know what I realized this year? Mom setting boundaries isn't the opposite of love. It's the foundation of it." Her insight, so simple yet profound, encapsulated everything I had learned through our painful journey. By finally establishing firm boundaries, I had not only reclaimed my own life but also created space for my daughter to reclaim hers. The temporary pain of confrontation had led to authentic healing that enabling never could. That night, after everyone left, I sat on my balcony watching stars reflect on the quiet harbor waters. The journey had been harder than I ever imagined, but the outcome more rewarding than I dared hope. My retirement years looked nothing like I'd planned. They were richer, more authentic, and built on stronger foundations. The truth I now understood with bone-deep certainty was that sometimes the most loving thing we can do for those we care about is to stop sheltering them from consequences. Sometimes real support means watching someone struggle toward their own solutions rather than providing our own. And sometimes when someone threatens to call the police, if you don't leave your own home, the wisest response is to smile and call the realtor instead. Have you ever had to make an incredibly difficult decision that turned out to be the right one, even when it broke your heart at the time? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. And if this journey resonated with you, please subscribe to hear more reflections on family boundaries and the courage to begin again. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, it's never too late to choose yourself while still loving others well.